When a brilliant lawyer meets a bought judge, there is a chance that the judge will go to jail. The courtroom in Detroit was a study in tension and cold precision. Under the dim glow of ornate chandeliers, the atmosphere exuded a sense of impending confrontation. The polished, dark wood of the floor creaked softly under each step, and a low hum of murmurs floated among the gathered crowd. Reporters clustered at the edges, their notepads rustling as they exchanged hushed whispers about the dramatic case unfolding before them. At the center of it all stood Jasmine Crockett, a brilliant, young attorney known for her keen intellect and fiery determination, defending a group of tenants threatened with sudden eviction from their longtime home. These tenants were on the brink of losing everything, carried away by the ruthless machinations of an influential real estate developer, Trevor King. Jasmine's stance was both defiant and dignified. She was dressed in a sharp, modest suit that spoke of hard-won success despite her humble beginnings, and her dark eyes shone with the promise of justice. Across the polished courtroom bench, Judge Howard Gates, a man infamous for his brusque demeanor and unwavering adherence to what he considered order, glowered at Jasmine. His voice, rough and impatient, cut through the air as he sneered, addressing her directly. "Ms. Crockett, this isn't a stage for theatrics. Cease your performance. This is a court of law, not a theater, so please stop this dramedy." His words were delivered with a dismissive sneer that drew a ripple of derisive laughter from some of the onlookers, particularly from the group of sharply dressed attorneys sitting with Trevor King in the first row. Their eyes shone with self-satisfied contempt as they exchanged smirks. They anticipated failure from the young lawyer who had dared represent a ragtag group of tenants. The mood in the courtroom was heavy with a cocktail of skepticism and tension. The sparse light from the chandeliers mixed with the soft glow of computer screens and desk lamps, casting long, dramatic shadows across the stone walls. Every creak of the floor and every whispered aside from the press heightened the sense of foreboding. In one corner of the room, the team of attorneys representing Trevor King sat with practiced arrogance, nodding subtly as if already counting their impending victory. The ambient noise of clinking pens against notepads and the distant murmur of whispered conversation lent a cinematic quality to the unfolding drama. Jasmine, remaining impeccably poised despite the barrage of ridicule, refused to be intimidated. With a steady, controlled tone, she began presenting her defense for the tenants accused of squatting in a building targeted by Trevor King's eviction scheme. Her carefully chosen words outlined a counter-narrative that not only disputed the legitimacy of the eviction but also hinted at a far more insidious truth, that Judge Gates and Trevor King were entwined in a corrupt web of bribery and collusion designed to expedite unfair evictions. "My learned friends," Jasmine began, her voice resonating along the courtroom's polished surfaces, "what we have before us is not merely a dispute over tenancy, but evidence of a systematic abuse of power. I intend to prove that the lease agreement, the one your client uses to justify these expulsions, is a doctored document, a fabrication meant to deceive." Her eyes flickered across the room, challenging the scoffs and dismissive glances. The murmurs faded into an anticipatory silence as she continued. "I have acquired incontrovertible evidence that will show that Mr. King, in league with this court's very own Judge Gates, has been accepting bribes to fast-track these evictions." At that moment, a murmur of shock ran through the courtroom. The once smug countenances of King's attorneys now twitched in disbelief, while Judge Gates's expression hardened further, his eyes narrowing dangerously. There was an electric pause as the weight of her claim hung in the air. The delicate balance of respect and derision tilted precariously. Before anyone could interject, Jasmine's voice grew steadier as she prepared to unveil her first piece of explosive evidence, a forged lease agreement that she had painstakingly obtained through clandestine channels. The tension reached its peak as she set the document on the counter before her, her calm determination clashing with the arrogance that permeated the room. In that charged moment, as the courtroom held its collective breath, the stage was set for a battle of wills, one that would ultimately challenge the very foundations of corruption in high places. Taking a measured breath, Jasmine Crockett stepped forward once again, ready to dismantle the crooked case presented by Trevor King's powerful cronies. With purposeful determination, she reached into her elegant leather folder and withdrew a pristine document, a lease agreement that purportedly justified the sudden eviction of the tenants. The paper, embossed with official-looking seals and signatures, glistened under the dim courtroom lights. Every element of the document, however, betrayed subtle signs of tampering. Inconsistent spacing, a watermark that appeared artificially imposed, and signatures that, upon closer inspection, lacked the fluid, natural curves of authentic ink. "Your Honor," Jasmine began firmly, raising her voice so that even the stern Judge Howard Gates could hear her clearly over the soft clatter of anxious whispers. "I present Exhibit A, the lease agreement used by Mr. King to unlawfully evict my clients. I contend that this document is nothing more than a forgery designed to deceive the court and justify an illegal eviction." A murmur ran through the courtroom as Judge Gates's icy eyes narrowed at the document. His expression, usually impassive, twisted into a dismissive sneer. "Ms. Crockett," he barked, his tone laced with contempt, "this is a mere piece of paper, hardly worthy of the dramatic flair you seem so intent upon exhibiting. Do you really expect this fabricated lease to override the tangible evidence we have?" His words dripped with skepticism, and a few of King's well-dressed attorneys exchanged knowing glances with barely concealed amusement. Undeterred by the judge's derision, Jasmine maintained her composure. "With respect, Your Honor," she replied coolly, "the discrepancies in this lease are glaring. The spatial irregularities and questionable signatures provide clear evidence that it is not legitimate. More importantly, this document forms just one part of a broader tapestry of corruption, a tapestry I am prepared to unravel." As the judge's gaze shifted between the document in Jasmine's outstretched hand and her unwavering eyes, the tension in the room deepened. Throughout the packed courtroom, reporters scribbled furiously in their notepads, and whispers of forgery and scam rippled among the spectators. Even some of the attorneys representing Trevor King wore expressions that flickered with doubt beneath their stoic exteriors. Before anyone could further dismiss her claim, Jasmine smoothly transitioned. "Now, I direct your attention to Exhibit B, the bank records." Carefully, she retrieved a set of printed statements from a secure online portal. They detailed a series of transactions that unequivocally contradicted the narrative Trevor King had constructed to justify the eviction. The records showed no such lease-related payment ever had been received. Instead, they revealed mysterious transfers between accounts, one of which, in particular, was traced directly to funds received by Mr. King. At that moment, the auditorium's hum of murmurs surged, as if the very air was charged with the electricity of revelation. Judge Gates's hardened expression faltered minutely as he scanned the bank records, his eyes lingering on a particular entry that detailed a transfer labeled vaguely, "consulting fee." A fee that, when cross-examined, correlated suspiciously with the timeline of the eviction. "Clearly," Jasmine continued, her voice now imbued with a fierce urgency, "these bank records disprove the authenticity of the lease and further implicate Mr. King in a scheme to defraud these tenants for his own gain. The evidence indicates that funds were funneled directly into his account as part of a bribe designed to curry favor with this court and expedite the eviction process." The room fell into a heavy, tense silence as Judge Gates, momentarily caught off guard, fixed his gaze on Jasmine. His earlier derision was now mixed with an unmistakable hint of apprehension. The evidence laid out before him, this tangible documentation of financial misdeeds, began to erode the veneer of propriety he had so long maintained. A bead of perspiration trickled down one side of his forehead as the gravity of the emerging scandal became increasingly undeniable. The murmurs among the spectators grew louder. Many leaned forward, squinting at the bank records displayed on the document projector that now illuminated Jasmine's exhibits with clinical precision. In that potent, cinematic moment, the court's focus shifted irreversibly from the facade of a simple eviction dispute to the dark underbelly of corruption, linking the judge and the influential developer. Jasmine's calm, methodical presentation of evidence, the forged lease and the incriminating bank records, set the stage for a confrontation that promised to shake the foundations of the entire case. As the spotlight of truth shone in the tense confines of the courtroom, Jasmine's eyes narrowed with quiet determination. The intrigue was palpable. Everyone in the room knew that what followed would be the turning point of this high-stakes battle for justice. With a steely gaze, Jasmine moved to the center of the courtroom as a hush descended over the gallery. "Your Honor, I now present Exhibit C," she announced, her voice unwavering despite the lingering vitriol from Judge Gates's earlier remarks. She held up a small, digital recorder and connected it to a portable speaker. On the screen behind her, timestamps began to roll as the audio recording was replayed for all to hear. A low murmur rippled through the room as the recorded conversation emerged, each word a slow, deliberate exposure of hidden corruption. The recording captured a hushed discussion, laden with subtext, between Judge Gates and one of his trusted aides. In the crisp audio, a voice, barely masked as that of the judge, coldly promised, "Harris, ensure that everything is in place. Trevor King will be pleased. We'll get everything fixed. No questions asked." A pause followed. Then the judge's voice cut in with a condescending chuckle. "Exactly. Let's make sure our interests are protected at all costs." The conversation continued with similar exchanges that implied monetary incentives and a disregard for justice. As the recording filled the courtroom, tension soared. The once muted whispers of reporters grew into audible gasps as the damning evidence of collusion between Judge Gates and Trevor King unfolded. Every syllable of the incriminating dialogue resonated powerfully, hanging in the air like a specter of betrayal. Some in the audience shifted uneasily. Even the attorneys representing King exchanged nervous glances. For several agonizing minutes, the room remained spellbound by the recording. Jasmine's calm tone cut through the rising emotional tide. "Clearly, this conversation confirms that bribery has influenced the alleged eviction proceedings. The transcript of my request for these records, which I have submitted as Exhibit D, is on file. It demonstrates that this recording was obtained legally and without tampering." Her words, firm and deliberate, echoed around the dark, wood-paneled courtroom. Judge Gates's hardened facade began to crack. His eyes darted to the recorder and then back to Jasmine, a flicker of indignation etching across his features. "Ms. Crockett, these allegations are preposterous," he roared suddenly, his deep voice reverberating off the high ceilings. "I will not stand here and allow my integrity, my entire career, to be dragged through the mud on the basis of a manipulated audio file." Anger flared as Judge Gates rose slowly from his bench, his face contorting with fury. His outburst, unexpected and uncharacteristically personal, sent shockwaves through the courtroom. "This is nothing but a desperate act by an attorney who thinks she can overturn procedure with cheap theatrics," he bellowed, though the recording behind him made it increasingly difficult for him to maintain his composure. Jasmine met his anger with quiet resolve. "Your Honor, the facts speak for themselves. I am here not to stage a performance, but to expose the truth hidden behind collusion. The evidence clearly implicates unethical practices involving both this court and Mr. King," she stated, her voice steady despite the palpable tension. As she spoke, the digital recorder continued its playback, each word anchoring her claim further in truth. The judge's eyes flashed, and his hands began to tremble as he glared at the speaker, his anger mounting with every incriminating phrase in the recording. The murmurs among the spectators intensified into sharp whispers. Even the normally stoic press cameras seemed to capture every subtle twitch of his expression. In that fraught moment, debate raged silently in every corner of the courtroom. Was this the moment when a respected judicial authority would finally be unmasked? Just as the tension reached its zenith and Judge Gates prepared to unleash further tirade, Jasmine's eyes remained fixed, determined, and unyielding, a silent promise that this battle was only just beginning. The calculated exposure of his private conversation had rattled the foundations of the case, and now, with the entire room hanging on every detail, the next step in her strategy loomed perilously close. Before anyone could predict the imminent fallout, a sudden, authoritative tonal shift from Jasmine cut the dramatic pause. "In light of these revelations," she said, her voice now edged with resolve, "I must request that proper action be taken against this miscarriage of justice." Every eye in the room widened, and even a few reporters leaned forward in anticipation. Just then, A tense murmur came from behind, a sound unmistakably rising from the back of the courtroom, as if someone was about to disrupt the fragile order. The atmosphere was electric, poised on a knife's edge, as the scene reached the critical juncture of her next move, one that would demand an immediate and unequivocal response. With the damning audio evidence still echoing in the charged courtroom, Jasmine Crockett's eyes burned with fierce determination. The weight of each incriminating word seemed to hang in the air, as if frozen across the dark-paneled walls of the Detroit court. Taking a slow, measured breath, Jasmine fixed her gaze on Judge Howard Gates, whose previously unassailable expression now flickered with barely concealed anger and panic. "Your Honor," Jasmine's voice rang clear, trembling not with fear but with righteous indignation. "In light of the overwhelming evidence of corruption that has been presented here today, evidence that implicates your actions in facilitating these unlawful evictions, I demand that you be placed under arrest immediately for contempt of court and for engaging in bribery." Her words cut through the murmuring crowd like a clarion call for accountability. A stifled gasp rippled through the courtroom. The once orderly silence shattered as several voices murmured their disbelief. Trevor King, seated imperiously among his cohort of slickly dressed attorneys in the front row, whipped his head around in alarm. His eyes widened, and his once confident posture crumpled as the reality of the unfolding scandal set in. King's smug smile evaporated, replaced by a look of raw panic as he sensed that the carefully maintained facade of his power was beginning to crumble. Judge Gates's face turned a deep shade of red. "Ms. Crockett, you are making baseless charges," he bellowed, his voice erupting as he slammed his gavel repeatedly on the bench. "This is nothing but a desperate act." His outburst, however, did little to obscure the gravity of the evidence laid bare before him. At that moment, one of the uniformed bailiffs stepped forward, his steps measured but his eyes intense. "Ma'am, please remain calm. I am calling the police department to secure the courtroom," he announced firmly. Even though the officers had been present earlier, none anticipated a situation where the very judge would be confronted in such a manner. Jasmine's voice did not waver as she continued. "I will not stand idly by while corruption undermines the rights of these tenants. This court is meant to serve justice, and it is now time that justice holds those in positions of authority accountable." Her words, laden with conviction, filled the room with a palpable tension. Within minutes, the building's intercom crackled and a commanding voice announced that additional law enforcement had arrived. The heavy doors at the rear of the courtroom swung open, and two police officers, their uniforms crisp and expressions determined, entered swiftly. Their presence added a new dimension to the unfolding scene. Cameras from journalists clicked and recorded every moment as the officers advanced toward Judge Gates. Trevor King, who had been slouching confidently moments before, now shifted in his seat frantically, his eyes darting around as he grasped the severity of the situation. "This isn't," he stuttered, his voice lost in the rising chaos as he tried desperately to gather his composure. But his protests were drowned out by the stern, authoritative directives from both the bailiffs and the arriving officers. One of the officers, with a steely tone, addressed Judge Gates. "Sir, based on the evidence presented, we are placing you under arrest for corruption and contempt of court. Please step down from the bench now." The words, blunt and unyielding, sent shockwaves through the audience. Judge Gates's face, once a mask of cold indifference, contorted into one of fury and disbelief as he found himself cornered by the very laws he was supposed to uphold. Unable to muster any additional protest, Judge Gates hesitated a fraction too long, enough for the officers to move in. In a flurry of swift, coordinated movements, they cuffed his trembling wrists and escorted him away from the bench. A stunned silence fell over the room, punctuated only by the clink of handcuffs and the murmured exclamations of those witnessing the historic turn of events. Even Trevor King, his earlier arrogance now replaced with utter panic, fumbled as he attempted to gather his belongings. His eyes darted in hopeless confusion, and he was quickly surrounded by his own legal team, his fate now hanging in an uncertain balance. As Judge Gates was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the atmosphere transformed completely. The once dismissive laughter and cynical whispers now gave way to a profound, collective sense of vindication. Jasmine's eyes glowed with quiet triumph as she gathered her documents. Each piece of evidence, from the forged lease to the secretly recorded audio, had converged to expose not only the betrayal by Trevor King but also the corruption rooted to the highest echelons of the court. The officers' measured steps down the dark corridors of the courthouse signaled the end of an era of unchecked authority. Every witness, attorney, and spectator absorbed what had unfolded. A dramatic reversal where truth and due process had triumphed over prejudice and greed. A heavy silence lingered in the courtroom as the implications set in. Jasmine's brave stand had not only defended her clients, but had cast an unyielding light on a network of corruption. The tide had turned. The power of evidence and tenacity had forced those in authority to answer for their misdeeds. The courtroom erupted into a cacophony of whispers and gasps as Judge Gates was led away in handcuffs. The sight of a once powerful figure being escorted out of his own courtroom was a moment no one present would ever forget. Trevor King, now visibly shaken, attempted to maintain his composure, but the cracks in his confidence were evident. His attorneys huddled around him, whispering frantically, but their efforts to strategize were futile against the tidal wave of evidence Jasmine had presented. Jasmine Crockett, standing tall and resolute, turned her attention back to the tenants she was representing. Their faces, once etched with fear and uncertainty, now glowed with hope and gratitude. She gave them a reassuring nod before addressing the court. "Your Honor," she said, directing her words to the interim judge who had stepped in to oversee the remainder of the proceedings. "With the removal of Judge Gates and the overwhelming evidence of corruption, I move to dismiss the eviction case against my clients. It is clear that this entire process was tainted from the start." The interim judge, a woman with a reputation for fairness and integrity, reviewed the evidence Jasmine had meticulously laid out. After a brief pause, she nodded. "Ms. Crockett, the court agrees. The eviction case against your clients is hereby dismissed, and the tenants are granted the right to remain in their homes. Furthermore, this court will cooperate fully with the ongoing investigation into the corruption exposed here today." The gallery erupted into applause, a rare and spontaneous display of emotion in a courtroom. The tenants hugged one another, tears streaming down their faces as they realized they had won not just a legal battle, but a fight for their dignity and their homes. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, their cameras flashing as they documented the triumph of justice over corruption. Trevor King, now pale and visibly sweating, attempted to leave the courtroom quietly, but his path was blocked by law enforcement officers. "Mr. King," one of them said firmly, "you're under investigation for your role in this corruption scheme. Please come with us." King's protests were drowned out by the murmurs of the crowd and the clicking of cameras. His once imposing figure now seemed small and insignificant as he was escorted out of the room. Jasmine stood silently for a moment, taking in the scene. The weight of the battle she had fought and won began to settle on her shoulders. She had risked everything, her career, her reputation, and even her safety, to expose the truth. And now, standing in the midst of a courtroom transformed by her courage, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. As the applause subsided, Jasmine turned to the tenants and said, "This victory is yours. It's a testament to the power of standing together and refusing to be silenced. Let this be a reminder that no matter how powerful the opposition may seem, justice can prevail when we fight for what's right." The tenants responded with cheers and heartfelt thanks, their voices echoing through the courtroom. Jasmine's words resonated deeply, not just with them, but with everyone present. The reporters, the spectators, even the court staff. All were moved by the courage and determination she had shown. As the courtroom emptied, Jasmine gathered her belongings and prepared to leave. Outside, a crowd had gathered, chanting her name and holding signs that read, "Justice for all," and "Thank you, Jasmine." She paused at the top of the courthouse steps, looking out at the sea of faces. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed by the support and gratitude directed her way. Raising her hand to quiet the crowd, she spoke into the microphone offered by a reporter. "This is not just my victory, she said, her voice steady and clear. This is a victory for every person who has ever been silenced, for every community that has ever been overlooked. Together, we have shown that truth and justice can prevail, even in the face of corruption. Let this be the beginning of a movement to hold those in power accountable and to ensure that everyone, no matter their circumstances, is treated with dignity and respect. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices a chorus of hope and determination. Jasmine descended the steps, shaking hands and exchanging words of encouragement with those who had gathered. She knew that the fight was far from over, but in that moment, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle she had fought in the courtroom was just the beginning of a larger journey, one that she was ready to face with the same courage and conviction that had brought her this far. In the weeks following the arrest of Judge Gates, the ripple effects of the courtroom showdown in Detroit began to surface far beyond those cold, wood-paneled walls. The scandal had erupted into a citywide investigation, and whispers of systemic corruption within the judicial system now roiled the corridors of power in Detroit. Reporters, legal experts, and civil rights advocates converged on the courthouse, demanding transparency and accountability. The viral recordings, detailed bank records, and the forged lease document, each a piece of the extensive puzzle Jasmine Crockett had so painstakingly assembled, had exposed a collusive network connecting influential real estate developers like Trevor King with the corrupted authority of Judge Gates. In a somber press conference held in a near-empty courtroom one chilly morning, a newly appointed investigative panel from the State Attorney General's office detailed the emerging findings. Our preliminary inquiry, the spokesperson announced, indicates that this organized racket has been operating for years, funneling bribes and illicit funds between certain judges and developers to force unfair evictions. The statement sent shockwaves through the legal community and galvanized support from tenants and community activists alike. Amid this backdrop of institutional reckoning, Jasmine Crockett sat alone in her modest apartment overlooking a gray Detroit skyline. Late in the evening, the quiet hum of city life outside became a reflective counterpoint to the storm of events that had upended her career and redefined the course of justice. In her journal, her pen moved feverishly, capturing her thoughts with a raw sincerity. Today, I witnessed the fall of arrogance and the triumph of truth. What we fought for in that courtroom was not just a win for a group of tenants. It was a win for every voice silenced by corruption, every person judged by appearance rather than merit. The road ahead may be long and fraught with challenges, but I promise to carry on this fight. Each piece of evidence, every recorded whisper of bribery, has reinforced my unyielding belief in the power of transparency and accountability. Her words, both an affirmation of her resolute spirit and a call to arms for the oppressed, soon found their way onto social media. Posts, shared by activist groups, legal reform organizations, and outraged citizens, echoed her sentiments. Hashtags #Justice for Tenants, #Stand with Crockett, and #Break the Corruption started to trend locally, igniting impassioned debates and drawing support from unexpected quarters. Simultaneously, the internal investigation deepened. Federal authorities collaborated with state officials, tracing financial trails that pointed not only to Trevor King's greed, but also to a wider network of corruption that implicated several high-ranking officials. New subpoenas were issued, and more evidence continued to surface, further tarnishing the once untouchable reputation of those involved. In courtrooms across Michigan, similar cases began to be re-examined under the harsh light of this new scrutiny. The fallout was significant. In subsequent sessions, reformed judicial panels vowed to overhaul protocols in eviction cases and tighten oversight of real estate transactions. Jasmine's brave stand had not only resulted in justice for her clients and the tenants, but had also sparked a larger movement demanding accountability and fair treatment for all. One afternoon, while walking through a busy downtown square, Jasmine was approached by an impassioned community organizer. "Ms. Crockett," the organizer said, voice rising with hope and fervor, "your courage has inspired us all. We need more voices like yours to challenge injustice wherever it hides. Will you join us in this movement?" Jasmine paused, then smiled softly. "I'm not finished fighting yet," she replied resolutely. Every battle we win makes it a little harder for corruption to hide in the shadows. Her determination was mirrored in the steady pace of her steps and the unwavering set of her shoulders. The story of that fateful day in the Detroit courtroom had become a beacon not only for tenants facing unfair evictions but also for anyone who had ever felt voiceless against systemic oppression. It was a reminder that, armed with the truth and guided by relentless resolve, even the most deeply entrenched systems of power could be challenged, and eventually changed. As the investigation continued and the nation watched with bated breath, Jasmine Crockett's final message reverberated: never let injustice go unchallenged. Stand up, speak out, and let the truth shine through, even when the odds seem insurmountable. What do you think is the most important lesson from Jasmine Crockett's courageous stand against corruption and prejudice? Have you ever taken a stand that changed the course of injustice in your community? Write your opinion in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. I hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a comment, sharing your thoughts about it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new and equally exciting stories. See you in the next video.